Good afternoon. It is Friday, October 6th, 2023. I was having a discussion one time with a fellow about knowing and following God's will. And he made the statement to me, if only God would write it in the sky. And how often we want God to make things so plain. But there's a fundamental error in our thought processes if we erroneously think that God needs to conform to our thoughts, words, or ideas. The Pharisees had that problem. In Mark chapter 11, verses 11 to 13, and I'm reading from the New Living Translation, second edition, it says, when the Pharisees heard that Jesus had arrived, they came and started to argue with him, testing him. They demanded that he show them a miraculous sign from heaven to prove his authority. When he heard this, he sighed deeply in his spirit and said, why do these people keep demanding a miraculous sign? I tell you the truth, I will not give this generation any such sign. So he got back into the boat and left them and crossed to the other side of the lake. When we're having a conversation with someone, it's wrong for us to try and come up with an answer instead of listening to what the other person has to say. That's what the Pharisees did here. They came up with the purpose of testing him. They wanted to argue with him. They started to argue rather than to actually converse. They didn't care what Jesus had to say. They weren't going to listen to him anyway. They wanted to win an argument. They tested him, and even worse, they demanded from him. They demanded he show a miraculous sign from heaven in order to prove his authority to them. He'd already fed the 5,000. He's already fed the 4,000. What other kind of miraculous sign do they want? You see, Jesus never tried to prove his authority. Those who really have authority don't have to prove it. They just exercise it. It's always the insecure people that are not sure whether or not they do have the authority that try to prove their authority. When someone's got to throw their weight around, it means they really not as big of a deal as they think they are. And that's why Jesus sighed in his spirit. Why do these people, and I think it was pretty obvious to everybody that he meant the Pharisees, why do these people keep demanding a sign? Who in the world thinks and is arrogant enough to think that they're important enough to demand that the Son of God do what they want him to do? It's one thing to ask. It's another to plead. It's another to beseech. But to demand? No. And what does he say? He says, I will not. Let me give you a hint. Rather than demanding that God work on your agenda, try doing what the author of Hebrews says and try conforming yourself to God's agenda, to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. This week, may God so work in your heart and life that you are conformed to God's image and transformed this week. God bless you.